Now I want to talk about the broader religious structure, and I want to slow down here because I think the listener needs to understand a few things. You need to understand that this was not just church. This was a specific kind of church culture. I think that's important. We're talking about apostolic, Pentecostal, oneness Pentecostalism. And, if you don't know about that, I encourage you to investigate. But we're talking about a world connected to networks and fellowship and in coverings and spiritual chains of command, even. So when I think about this, I think a few things need to be mentioned. We're talking about institutional structures. To be clear, churches like the one I was in are rarely isolated institutions, right? They operate inside larger apostolic Pentecostal fellowships, leadership networks. So the ministry I was under had ties to structures connected to organizations like the Pentecostal Churches of Jesus Christ, PCJC, and the broader Oneness Apostolic Pentecostal movement, which includes major bodies like the PAW, the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. These are large institutional fellowships with thousands of churches under their belt, connected through layers of leadership, pastors, bishops, and presiding authorities. That structure matters because accountability is supposed to move upward through those layers. You'll see why that is problematic. So a world where men accountable upward on paper, but downward, they often function like kings in their own domains. That's what I'm talking about. A world where the man of God was not just respected, he was spiritually protected. A world where questioning him could be framed as you questioning God, and God forbid we do that, right? This is a world where we're taught if we are loyal, if we're faithful, if we honor leadership, God will bless you. In that kind of world, protections for vulnerable people, they need to be plain, they need to be visible, they need to be accessible, they need to be independent. And I'll take this even further and say this needs to be especially for youth, for queer youth, especially for young people under intense spiritual pressure. And to my knowledge, in this movement or in the environment that I was in, those protections were not plain. They were not visible. They were not accessible. There was no clear public youth-facing structure that I knew of at the time that told me that if a pastor crosses a line, here's where you go. Here's how you report it, or here is how you would be protected, or here's who investigates, here's who is independent, here's what happens. None of that was, here's what happens next. None of that was a part of my story. That didn't exist for me in any real way that I could access as a young person, and that matters. I think it matters because people love to ask survivors what you should have done or tell them what they should have done, right? But they really ask the institution, what did they build? What did you build or fail to build for people like us, right? I do want to talk about this a little bit later and in more detail, especially in contrast to institutions that, however imperfectly, they've developed visible youth protection frameworks, reporting channels, audit structures, and formal policies after scandal. I think that's important. In many institutions today, especially after major abuse scandals, you can find clear youth protection policies, public reporting channels, review boards, background checks, and informal complaint procedures. For example, the Catholic Church in the United States, they've implemented the Dallas Charter, right, which created national standards for reporting abuse and protecting minors. That is important. But in the church environment I was a part of, I didn't see anything that was plainly visible or accessible to a young person like me. No clear reporting pathway, again, no independent review process, no youth protection structure that I understood existed. So again, in my world, what I experienced was not that, right? What I experienced was haphazard. It was personal, it was relational, it was internal. Tell another leader and hope for the best, essentially was my situation. And that is not protection. That is exposure. Another thing I need people to understand is that grooming does not only target an individual. It often works through a community first, right? Trust has to be built, credibility has to be established, access has to be normalized. And in my case, that started long before I was fully aware of it. This pastor, he already had credibility with my family. My father knew him from youth. My aunt and uncle knew him from their spiritual youth because he had preached in their previous church. He was not a stranger. He was a known figure. He was a guest preacher, a revival preacher, a prophetic preacher. He was known for his spiritual force, his prophetic prowess. He had an ability, at least that was seen at the time, to be so prophetically profound that lives were changed. He was so accurate in his prophecy that I think it made people afraid. And so his ability to speak into people's lives and say things that seem uncannily accurate or life-changing was real. So by the time he began building his own branch ministry, he was already standing on a foundation of trust with people connected to me. That matters, right? Because when someone already has spiritual credibility with your family, they don't have to build trust from scratch. They inherit it. And then they just need to deepen it. They just need to solidify it and make it more concrete. So when he started gathering people for Bible studies, building what would become his own flock, many people who were already familiar with him followed him, my family included. I attended those Bible studies that he was given permission to hold from his overseer. He would prophesy over me even, right? He would speak over my life, talk about my destiny, talk about my gifts, my spiritual gifts, my future, my becoming. He would speak directly into my pain, my hardship, my humble beginnings, and the environment I came from, what God had for me, how great I would be, what I was called to do. And he would talk about all of these things that he saw inside of me. And my family saw how receptive I was to that. I was behaviorally changed for the better because of these things. They saw me changing. They saw me becoming more engaged spiritually. They saw me becoming more hopeful. And, being a teenager, a young person who's very into God, that's not what we do. We are rebellious, right? We do all of these other things. The last thing we want to do is come to the church first. You do that later in life after you kind of lived your life. That wasn't my story. So I was more focused. I was more responsive. From their perspective, this man was helping me. He was building me up. He was speaking into my life. He was helping me become better. Yes, that built deeper trust, or of course it did. And so how could it not, right? He appeared to be effective. He appeared to be sent directly by God. He appeared to understand me in ways that other adults did not. Because my family loved me and wanted good for me, they wanted that influence to continue. And that is how grooming came to work in my family system. It doesn't always begin with obvious danger. It can begin with results that look good, with help, with support, with spiritual language, with gifts, with access, with apparent transformation. And so let me just say this, that is exactly what makes this situation so dangerous. And so I'm building this context embedded with details alongside of my story, because I don't want to just, recant what happened to me, but I also want to inform, because this is happening to people in real time today, and they need to know what to do. They need to know what to look for. So this is, I know some of my audience is just kind of, wanting me to get to it, and, they want to know what happened, but I'm trying to help somebody in real time, because people are looking to outlets, social media outlets like this, just to find out, what do I do next? They are in the middle of the situation as we speak.